Please join us now, Reverend Vanessa Nash, to share what you have to share today.
Well, hello, everybody. First, I want to express how grateful I am for this opportunity because it's really given me a chance to recognize the progress that I've made in my life in the past 5 years. And I think this is absolutely the perfect spot to do it because Doug and Doreen both have been a huge, huge part of my support system. Doreen has been there to show me my spiritual tools and how to use them. And Doug has always given me his beautiful words of encouragement and, just kind of make me realize, hey, you accomplished what you're trying to accomplish. And I really appreciate that. So just to let where I was, about 5 years ago, I was 41 and I had been living with my mom again for about 2 years for financial reasons. It was not a happy situation. I felt like I was a burden to her. My dog that I had had for 13 years had passed away, and that took me a really long time to get over. And there was just like this underlying sadness. I had multiple jobs where I was very unappreciated, didn't make enough money to pay the bills, but I worked really, really hard. And it seemed like my wheels were spinning and I wasn't getting anywhere. Relationships, I would meet a guy. After a couple of months, I would, tell him to hit the road because he didn't treat me well. And I felt like the same situations were following me around. I felt very frustrated. I felt very defeated, and I was in a dark, dark place. And at one point, I decided that, you know what? I can't live this way anymore. I mean, it just got to that point to where what was happening, I couldn't function. And I'm going to be really honest and really vulnerable and admit that I was really, really close to suicide, like to the point that I was planning it out because I just couldn't do it anymore. And I had, my little pug, Warner Wayne, who's sleeping soundly behind me. I had him and I didn't want to leave him behind. And I honestly was thinking about driving my car in a lake. I'm serious. It was to that point, but my concern, and the reason I didn't is I was terrified that he would die and I would have to live and I would survive and I would have to live knowing that I had done that to him. And so I was like, okay, well, that's not an option. So the only choice is to uh, change my life. And I kind of really didn't know what to do. But one thing I did know was, I had realization number one. I had to fix what wasn't working on the inside before I could change the external conditions. And so, I realized that, I would go on a diet and exercise and gain it back. I would go on dating sites and meet the same type of dude and basically have the same relationship. I would change jobs and I still had, an unappreciative boss that rode me and, still couldn't afford to pay my bills. And I felt like my wheels were spinning and I wasn't going anywhere. And, I realized that by trying to change the external conditions, it was like having an old car in my yard and painting it up and making it real pretty, but not paying any attention to the hood. You got to fix what's under there. You're not going to get down the road. And so that finally came to me that that's what I needed to do. I was I felt a little bit overwhelmed by that because I really didn't know where to start. And then one day I came across in a catalog of spiritual books and CDs, there was a Michael Bernard Beckwith Life Visioning CD. And he asked a series of questions. Do you feel like life is against you? Do you feel like no matter what you do, you fail? And there were like 6 or 8 questions, and every single one of them was yes. And so I'm like, okay, well, maybe this man can help me. And so I ordered the CD set. And at that point, I had like a 30-minute commute to work. And I was in a car that I had just found out that the engine was going to blow anytime. And there was nothing that could be done about it. And so I'm like, okay, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to focus on the CD. So I would drive to work every day and listen to it. And it was really, really deep, and it was hard for me to understand. But each time I listened to it, I understood a little bit better. And I started realizing that I was going to have to change my thinking. And I really didn't know how to do it. But one thing I did was bring in the good. And I started saying Michael Bernard Beckwith's affirmation: I am available to more good than I have ever imagined, experienced, expressed, or manifested before. And I would say it over and over and over. And anytime ugly thoughts came in, that's how I would drown it out. One thing that I realized is I needed, to take small steps. And so I analyzed my situation, and I was like, what situation do I want to change the most? And that was my living situation. And I realized that every day I would go to work, but every day I would come home and I would be in those same four walls and just put myself in my tablet and play my games and not do anything else. And so I made the decision that I was going to leave the house once a day. And I knew that by doing this, that something was going to change. And I just held that intention. And so my go-to was the dog park because it was free and I could take my dog. And, I went to bookstores, and sometimes I would go to a Starbucks where a former coworker worked and hang out with them. I would just do something every day. So my friend Alyssa, who is also now a member of CSL, she came to me one day and she said, hey, a friend of mine told me about a church and I want to go check it out. And she invited me, and then she decided not to go. And now I want to check it out. Will you go with me? And I'm like, yes, I will, because that will be, my daily outing. And so I didn't think, I had no clue that was the most life-changing decision that I had ever made in my entire life. And so she and I went to CSL for the first time, and we got real anxious on the way there because we had not so good experiences in churches before. And we even devised an exit plan. And I told Alyssa, I said, if anybody makes you feel uncomfortable or you don't want to be there, I said, just put your hand around my wrist and start walking towards the door, and I'll figure out it's time for us to go. And that was our plan, because I said, they probably won't light us on fire or anything, but the worst thing that could happen is, we might be judged, and me with my purple hair, it's really hard for us to blend in the scenery, So, but when we went, I realized that the message was real similar to the things that I had been listening to on my CD. And I had no clue until weeks later that I had walked into a New Thought church and I was listening to a New Thought CD. Hello, that was not an accident. So my biggest takeaway from the first time was I really liked the energy of the people. We were welcomed and everybody came and hugged us. And yeah, that was a little bit overwhelming because I'd never experienced it, but I never felt that much love and acceptance from complete and total strangers. And so I went and I started going and I really started listening, and I would go, to the Wednesday nights. And that's when I came to realization number 2, that the most important relationship that I'll ever have is the one that I have with myself. And shortly after I got there, they started talking about self-talk. And one day I heard somebody say, don't say anything to yourself that you wouldn't say to your best friend. And Alyssa was sitting next to me, and I looked to her and I looked in her eyes and I thought about some of the things that I had said to myself. And I thought about saying that to her, and I just started sobbing because I would never say that to her. And it made me realize how harmful and how not okay that behavior was. And so I deepened my affirmations. I added more. I started saying them more often, and I took foundations class. And, things started to shift and change. A friend of mine told me, hey, we need help really bad at my job. And he worked at a warehouse for men's jewelry. So all the stuff was like little bitty. It was kind of a cush job. I made more money. I had more hours. And when I took that job, I had no clue how I was going to get there because it was kind of far away, and going by bus was not a working situation. And Alyssa's husband bought her her dream card. She gave me her old one, and that's how I got to work. And so I worked there, and I got my own place while I lived there. And one day I felt like things were starting to stagnate, like things hadn't changed. Things were kind of moving along there for a while, and then it stopped. So I said a prayer in my car, and I basically affirmed that today is the day for change and for opportunity. It happens right here, right now. And I get out of my car, I go upstairs, I clock in, I start to continue my project. My boss calls me in the conference room and lays me off. And so I'm like, okay. And, I was kind of upset about it because I loved, my coworkers and everything. But I was like, you know what? I just affirmed today that today's the day for opportunity. And I always release, what isn't working to make room for something better. So you know what? It's time. And I applied for it, and I became a WAG dog walker. Which is an app for dog walking, and started walking dogs and absolutely loved it. And so that worked, and I started doing that like within less than a week. And the whole time I'm doing it in this old car, I'm affirming my car is going to last as long as I need it to. And shortly after that is when I had realization number 3, which is always think about what you like rather than what you don't like. And this was a pivotal moment in my life. I still remember when Doreen read us a piece from the book, The Power. And I still remember her saying, people often think about what they like or what they don't like rather than what they like. And it started talking about how when you think about it, it attracts more of what you don't like into your life. And so I did an experiment. I had this great big water jug that I took with me every day to work. And often I would forget it, and I would get really upset and be, oh, I hate it when I forget my jug. So I changed that dialogue. Whether I remembered it or whether I left it behind that day, I would think, I love it when I remember to bring my water jug. And every time I thought about it, I would have that thought. And guess what? I started remembering that jug a whole lot more often. And I noticed that. And so that was also a very, very hot summer. It got to be 108 for like 2 weeks, and my car didn't have air conditioner. And I was riding around all over the Metroplex, no air conditioner, in a hot car and walking dogs. And the only air conditioning I got was when I would go in and leash up the dogs. But I would not let myself focus on that. And when I was sitting in my car, I would envision myself with cold air just blasting all over me. And I would think about how good it felt and how happy I was. And that was my focus. And another thing that I did was, they had mentioned when people think about the bad parts of relationships, they attract bad relationships. So I did something that was very difficult for me. And I sat down and I made a list of all of the good things that came from my past relationships rather than thinking about the hurtful parts and the ugly parts. And it was really hard to do my ex-husband. And one of the things that I came up with on the list was that he introduced me to Star Trek, because we watched it every night before we went to bed. We watched Next Generation. And years later, I got my love of Next Generation from him. And so years later, I started watching Next Generation again and all the Star Treks. And I joined a Star Trek Facebook group for fans of Star Trek. And I met my current boyfriend. So that's definitely a TSRW moment. And then that brings us, this part of the story is realization number 4, embrace fear head on and always take a leap of faith. One of the things that I heard people talking about at CSL is people were talking about living in fear. And why that wasn't a good thing. And I was so new to it, I really didn't even know what that meant. And now I know that when I stepped into CSL, I had already done that, embraced my fear and went head on in. And after a while, I realized that what that means is to be absolutely terrified and do it anyway. I was faced with a situation. I was in my car one day and my car just broke down. I got a call from the mechanic saying burned out engine, $4,000. And the car was so old, it wouldn't have been worth it. So I had a huge decision to make. I could either get another car or get another job. And I thought about my doggos sitting by the door waiting for me to come. And I thought about never seeing their faces. And I thought about disappointing them. And that was when I broke down. I didn't break down when they told me my car was unrepairable, because I let go of things that no longer serve me with ease and grace. That's how I live. So, but that, I was like, okay, well, that tells me what I need to do. And so I did my 2 regularly scheduled dog walks. I put on my big girl panties and I walked inside the dealership, and I told them, I said, hi, I'm Vanessa. This is my situation. Credit's not great, but I have to have a car because I'm a dog walker, and I'm here to see what my options were. And when I walked in, I was thinking, maybe after a couple of weeks of looking, I would end up with a nice, gently used car. I had no idea what was about to happen. So they worked with me all day. And what I didn't know is that a person with questionable credit is actually easier to get a loan for a brand new car. And so they told me, we're going to put you in last year's, a brand new car, but it's last year's model, so you'll get rebates. It's a 2018 Chevy Cruze. And that was actually a nicer model of car than what I went to look at. And I'm like, okay. And so I ooched away and I went and sat in the borrowed car, and I had a conversation with myself. I'm like, okay, Vanessa, they're going to give you a car, but how are you going to pull this off? Because you're struggling to pay the bills as it is. And so then I was like, well, the universe isn't going to give me a car without giving me a way to pay for it. And I felt like if I turned down the car, it would be like that squirrel that tries to run across the street, and then they see headlights and they turn around for the safety of the bush and they get smacked. And so I said, okay. I said, I'll take the car. And I drove away. And I don't know how much y'all know about Harry Potter, but the school is broken into 4 houses based upon the attributes of the kids. So all of the really brave and courageous kids are in Gryffindor, and the colors are red and gold. And since my car is red, and buying a car without having a clue how I was going to pay for it was the bravest thing I ever did. I bought it and named it Gryffindor, and I became an Uber driver. And that's how I became an Uber driver. And I make a whole lot more money Ubering than I ever did dog walking. So I do my favorites and then I drive around it. And it's been a great experience. I did have a scary experience with a passenger. He did not physically harm me, but he made me realize that if something were to happen, I didn't know what to do. And I felt that fear creeping on me. Every time I'd pick up a man passenger, I'd be, oh God, what's going to happen now? And I was like, nope, you can't do that, or you're going to track that right to you. So I started taking a self-defense class about a year and a half. And I feel very confident that if something were to happen, I could get myself out of the situation. And so another really important thing I've learned, number 5, is always, always, always live in the moment. And again, I got that from one of Doreen's classes. I didn't even know that living in the moment was a thing. When I was at work, I was thinking about what I was going to do when I got home. When I was at home, I was thinking about what I was going to do at work. If I was eating some good food, I was going to think if I was going to have more when I finished. If I was listening to a song I liked, I was thinking about if I was going to replay, and I was like, okay, let's start really enjoying what's happening in the moment. And I've even done that with my bills. I would be like, oh, I got to get this bill paid. And I would work and make it happen. And I would pray and convince myself that everything was okay, and then I'd pay it and then not think about it again. hello, celebrate the success instead of be like, okay, I paid my car payment. Now I got to hustle for rent. You know, that it's still a work in progress, you know, but I check myself and keep myself in check with that. Um, but one thing that really came out of that with me living in the moment that I didn't expect, which is wonderful, because I'm focused on what I'm doing, I can keep up with my belongings so much better. I know where my keys are. I know where my phone is. And that had an effect that I didn't imagine, but that's something that needed to happen for over 40 years. So I'm really glad that I made that progress in that area. But I'm really, really glad that, you know, I did start to live in the moment, because there have been so many things that have happened in the past year that didn't appear on anybody's visioning board. And I see memories in Facebook pop up. And one of the things that happened is one of the dogs that I started walking when I first started 2 years ago, she passed in February, and I loved that little dog. And that was one of the things that I would really focus on, is how much I loved the dogs. And no matter what was going on, I would leave it in my car and I would just focus on her and her sister. And, you know, I can see in the pictures, you know, how much joy that gave Piggy as well. And I'm really glad that I focused on her and didn't miss out on the opportunity that I had while she was still here, you know. And it really makes you think, you know, this too shall pass. And it just shows you why it's so important to savor each moment, because what you're happening now, you know, you need to be grateful for it and enjoy it, because next year that might not be the situation. So I really have, you know, learned a whole lot in the last 5 years. And I remember Tracy Brown saying it takes 5 years to reinvent yourself. And I had a thought a few months ago, well, I'm really still not where I need to be. And after doing this talk, I'm like, you know what? But I've come a really long, long way. And so, you know what? I'm on round two. I'm going to reinvent myself again. And the consciousness I'm holding myself now, just like I envision myself in that air conditioned car, which I have, now I envision myself in the red sands of Australia, surrounded by kangaroos and koalas and eucalyptus. And so that's where I where I am now. And I really appreciate everybody listening, and I hope this helps you in some way in your personal growth and your spiritual journey as well.